Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's presentation, Surviving Disasters, Audits, and Regulators with On-Demand Failover. Before we dive in, I want to let everyone know that there are two useful tools in the webinar software today. First is a handouts section, and in those handouts you can grab a copy of these slides. You can also grab a report that we're going to discuss in the presentation. So go ahead and grab those in the handouts section. And then also there's a question tool in the software as well. And as you just heard Ken refer to it when we did the audio check, that question tool is going to be very helpful. You can use that throughout the entire presentation to put any questions that come up as we go along. We are going to be doing a giveaway at the end of the presentation, so please make sure to ask lots of relevant and on-topic questions, and that will make you eligible for that giveaway at the end. So presenting today is going to be Wayne Sadin. He is a member of the Infrascale Advisory Board. He has been in financial services technology since 1979. Also presenting is Ken Shaw. He is the founder and CEO of Infrascale. He's an experienced engineer and entrepreneur in the disaster recovery industry. So I'll pass it over to them. Take it away, guys.
Terrific. Thanks, Carla. And hello again, everybody. This is Ken. I'm the founder and CEO of Infrascale. So in a second here, we're going to be turning the microphone over to Wayne. But before we do that, let me just run you through the agenda for today's webinar. First, we're going to be talking about the pain points that are unique in DR and regulatory compliance for financial institutions, particularly credit unions and small banks. After that, we're going to talk a little bit about what DRAAS is, this new sort of frontier in disaster recovery. Talk about the benefits of DRAAS and how that can really impact your life. Then sort of a buying guide or an educational sort of list that will help you vet various DRAAS vendors. And finally, you'll hear from me and I'll tell you about Infrascale itself. Do remember that we're giving away that Kindle for the person who asks the most questions on topic. So find that questions tool, ask away. That's a bit of fun. And then lastly, today should just be the start of a conversation. So please join us on Twitter. You can talk to us using @Infrascale, or you can comment about today's webinar, ask questions about it using the hashtag DRAASFI for financial institution, DRAASFI. And we'd love to have that ongoing dialogue with you. So with that preamble, let me turn it over to Wayne here. Wayne, take it away.
Thank you very much, Ken. I do want to thank everybody for being here. And I'm going to talk about a couple of things. There's going to be a little bit of technology in what I talk about, because after all, I'm a CIO and many of you are CIOs or on the IT team. But we live in a world of compliance, and so we're going to talk a lot about the world in which we live, of compliance, regulators, auditors, and so on. I will say that I've been doing this since '79. I worked on Wall Street as a CIO or as an IT consultant and saw my first disaster plan at a global bank. And in 1980, I saw my first disaster at a global trading firm that actually took parts of the firm down for days, if not weeks. In the 35 years I've been doing this and been a CIO for about 25 of them, I have been audited, examined, met with regulators for my own bank, mortgage company, or banking software company hundreds of times. So I've seen the pain. To those of you that are CIOs, the slide that's on the screen will probably make you chuckle. To those of us that are not CIOs, you think, boy, that's really a powerful position, C-level, maybe reporting to the CEO. But in fact, the world we live in as CIOs is cool-sounding, but not all that powerful. Your general report to a CEO or maybe a COO or head of ops. There's a board of directors overseeing us. And of course, in today's world, very interested in disaster recovery. Financial institution disaster recovery is something the board is held accountable for. And then at our peer level is the CFO, the Chief Marketing Officer, Chief Risk Officer, Chief Operations or Operating Officer, and lots of other people who kind of look over our shoulder and help us do our jobs day to day. We spend a lot of time in disaster recovery regulations and rules, living up to the government CAMELS framework. There is a framework that those of us in financial services have seen. It's known as CAMELS. It stands for capital adequacy, assets, management capability, earnings, liquidity, and sensitivity to market risk. We in IT fall under the management capability rating of CAMELS, and so I'm sure lots of people here have seen that before. I will point out to you that under this rating scheme, everybody from the board on down is looked at. And so if your boards are not interested in disaster recovery, I'm surprised, because board members can in fact be held pretty personally accountable for overseeing the CAMELS ratings of their institution. Now, we can talk about lots of highfalutin security and backup and disaster recovery standards. And if you're a global international bank, you probably have a lot of familiarity with them. But for those of us in the States, especially in the small and mid-size realm, we are really worried about FFIEC, the Federal Financial Institutions Examination Council. As most of you know, I bet, it's an inter-company, interagency industry group with regulatory powers that kind of tells us how we should operate. And the good news is it gives us the framework for the audits that we are likely to see. So within the FFIEC, they do talk about disaster recovery, and that lets us drill down a little bit and talk about what a disaster recovery workflow might look like that satisfies FFIEC. So this is the hamster wheel that's referenced in one of the titles. This is the world we live in about how to satisfy an auditor and how to satisfy our employer and our owners that we're doing an adequate job in DR. So having been audited hundreds of times, I will tell you the first thing the auditor says is show me the written plan, whatever it may be. The second thing they're going to say is show me that you're doing what the plan says. For those that haven't been exposed to this, a great written plan not followed is bad. A terrible written plan not followed, and even if what you do is better, is also bad. The auditor wants to understand that we're managing. As CIOs, as IT executives, as risk professionals, our goal is to manage to our plan. And so it's very important to be able to say, we have a written plan, we carry out that plan, and then the auditors and regulators will look and say, and I think the plan is a good one. But you'll fail the audit if your plan is bad. I'm sorry, if your plan isn't documented, and you'll fail the audit if you're not following the steps in the plan. So the cycle goes, do a plan, get your data stored on-site or off-site, we'll talk about a little later. Test regularly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually. Some of us, depending on the size of the bank and what we do, may be auditing constantly. When I was in the mortgage servicing business, when I was in the armored car business, we were always running a disaster test of some sort for a client. But quarterly is pretty standard. Then we share the test results internally, generally with our internal auditors, possibly with external auditors or regulators, and we look at what failed. The rule of thumb in disaster testing in traditional world is something always fails. We live in a complex world. The technology is changing. What we bought is changing. The environment of our financial institution is changing. The regs are changing. The products are changing. And so no test of a normal disaster plan that isn't super expensive will ever be 100%. We look at what failed. We build a remediation plan, and then the cycle starts again. We update our written plan, or if the written plan is correct but the way we carried it out isn't right, we may change policy or procedure, and we go do the written plan again. This is the hamster wheel that we don't get off of because we're always having to see what changed. We're always having to see what we're testing, and that creates a problem for those of us in IT. Now, there are different kinds of DR. We want to make sure that we talk about that. When I was in the credit card business, when I was in the securities trading business, we couldn't be down. The allowable downtime for a credit card acquirer or a credit card issuer is measured in minutes per year. So disaster recovery is really not part of that discussion. You run a mirrored or failover environment, and everything is running in 2 or sometimes 3 or 4 places. We call that a mirrored site. And the RTO, the recovery time objective, how long to get back on the air, is generally pretty close to instantaneous. So we'll say instantaneous to 30 seconds. And the RPO, the recovery point objective, how much data we can afford to lose, is generally nothing. Losing credit card transactions, losing securities transactions is pretty heavily frowned upon. That is, however, very, very expensive. Expensive in capital assets, expensive in bandwidth, and also expensive in labor to keep it running. Hot site, the traditional, when you hear disaster recovery, you think a hot site. That's where I have most or all of my equipment replicated. I may be copying the data over with some technology that's not keeping it in perfect sync. And the goal of a hot site is to not lose any data and be able to get critical applications up with an RTO of 4 hours or less, and an RPO, again, of don't lose anything. A warm site may be where you do your development, may be where you do your testing. We have hardware there. It's not perfect. It doesn't have the ability to run all my applications, but it is something I can fail over to in a couple of hours or a couple of days. And depending on how I'm logging, journaling, recording, it's possible I'll lose a transaction. Oftentimes what you lose is the in-flight transaction, something that was halfway through being updated. You may lose some of that and have to rekey the last transaction. And then we have a cold site, which is a building. Maybe there's power, maybe there's desks, maybe there's raised floor. But a cold site really is what it says. It's a place where you go to when you know you're going to have to live somewhere for a long time. And again, in the disaster recovery world, it's hot site, warm site, typically the places of interest. Recognize they're very expensive to kind of expensive, and look at that kind of outage that you might be taking, even in the best of these worlds. There is a curve, or there's a line that we all live on, and this has been the traditional line for the longest time, starting with the longest time for recovery, the vertical axis, and then the cheapest option to the most expensive. So we started with off-site tape backup 70, 60 years ago. We copied everything to a tape. We carried it off-site. Maybe we put in some sort of backup machine, and we're now able to copy things on the site and survive what's called a micro disaster. We lose a server, we lose a disk drive, we lose a NAS or a SAN. Then we can do site-to-site replication. Rather than put it to tape, we may be putting it to disk. Going to cost you more, but because it's already on disk, I can do a much better recovery. And as we move up that line, what we see is we're spending more money for each thing and hopefully getting better and better responsiveness, less time without our systems. And that line has been unmoved. That angle has been unmoved for 50, 60, 70 years, ever since we realized we had to have 2 copies of our data on tape. But something's come up. The cloud changes the rules. The cloud changes everything. Now, I want to be clear. Infrascale is a great company with a great product, and you'll hear a lot about it. Infrascale didn't change the rules. Physics and economics changed the rules. The cloud changed the rules. And companies like Infrascale are taking advantage of these economics and physics and building a solution that takes you off that line. The cloud allows me to have a much faster recovery time at a much lower cost. So the physics of it is kind of Moore's law. We keep getting better and better equipment for the same amount of money. The density increases or doubles every 18 months, whether that's storage, whether that's networking, whether that's computing power. So that's the physics side. The economic side is there are companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, IBM, and so on, that are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe $1 trillion before the decade is over, in building hyperscale, hyper-converged DevOps cloud infrastructures. And so my point to the group here is, as banks, we've always lived on that line. You got to spend more to get better. And I'll show you, and Ken will show you, that the cloud allows you to move off that line into a different place. So when you think about it, we've had disaster backups. There is no today. As I was getting ready to do this, I realized I've been doing this for 35 years. And so everything I do today in my data center is generally the stuff I was doing 35 years ago. The tapes got faster. Now we went from tape to disk. The lines went from dog slow to kind of faster to much faster. So we're doing the same thing. I'm running a box over here with tapes. I'm running a thing over there with disk. I'm buying some backup software from a software company. I'm slapping all that stuff together, and I'm taking advantage of speed improvements. I'm taking advantage of cost improvements because everything gets better, faster, cheaper over years. But there is really no thing we're doing today that's radically different than I was doing 35 years ago when I started out in the industry. But the cloud really allows us to move from yesterday into tomorrow. And that starts getting into the question of, is the cloud really something we can use? Is it tomorrow, or can I use it today? So the FFIEC is mindful of the fact that banks and financial institutions are moving into the cloud. And so they've come up with a FFIEC statement about a year ago that clarified use of the cloud for financial institutions that are going to be examined, audited, and regulated according to these standards. I don't need to read them to you, but these are the characteristics that need to be worried about when you are looking for a cloud solution. Interesting point. If you've outsourced anything in the last 25 or 30 years, haven't you done these same things? Haven't you done vendor management, due diligence, security, continuity planning, and so on? So I think it's fascinating that the FFIEC has made an explicit statement about clouds. Because the nice thing about that is we as IT professionals now can say the regulators are okay with it, the environment that we're being audited against is okay with it, but it's the same management principles we've been applying for all those years. Let's drill down into the cloud and what we mean when we say cloud, because it means lots of things. The general distinction is public clouds and private clouds. A public cloud is Amazon or Microsoft Windows or Google or Infrascale, who sits in the same physics as these others. And what they've done is use design principles and the power of pure money to build environments that are extremely flexible, extremely secure, extremely scalable, extremely reliable, that avoids you and me having to go buy capital assets. We don't have to fill up a building with servers and storage and other things and make those multi-year capital commitments. They've invested in security. Look, if you're on this call and you work for one of the 5 mega global banks, you probably spend as much on security as one of these companies. But if you're the rest of us, you don't. I promise you, Google, Oracle, Microsoft, Amazon all spend a lot more money on security than all of us together could ever dream of spending on IT. So the cons, in theory, are you give up sovereignty, you give up speed, you give up control, and the cloud may go down. Yeah, well, look at the statistics, look at the evidence. I think you'll find that the investments they've made in new technology, in new ways to deploy technology, and I use the words hyperscale, hyperconverged, and DevOps, they're changing the fundamental way they build and operate data centers in a way that only makes sense when you're running a true mega data center. Again, most of us don't come anywhere close to the scale of hundreds of millions or billions of users, petabytes or exabytes of data, multiple data centers, millions and millions of servers. They can do things with this investment that the rest of us just can't afford. So the other side is the private cloud. And look, folks, the private cloud is not, I went and put some stuff in my colo facility, I put a rack of stuff, and now I have a private cloud at Backspace. The cloud is a series of operating principles: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. So some of you may be, in fact, operating hyperscale, hyperconverged DevOps. More power to you. But for most of us, I say, why do we need to go do that when someone else has already done it? So when you look at the public cloud, there are tremendous advantages. If for some reason you feel the need, you can do the same thing in the private cloud. But please don't think of it as business as usual. Now, let's talk about disaster recovery on top of the cloud. I'll reiterate what I said before. There was a yesterday, slow, because it is slow, recovery times measured in minutes, hours, and days. It's expensive. You got to build another thing, a building, a data center, a rack, and provision it yourself, maintain it, manage it, keep it running. And it's hardware, software, capital intensive. Or the world of tomorrow, when it's fast, when it's affordable, and when it's what we call cloud intensive, in the sense that somebody else is provisioning this stuff for you. And so everybody, I hope, comes away from this thinking, you've got to be thinking about the future, but the future is not that far away. In fact, you'll see very shortly that Infrascale offers it today. So if you're a bank, if you're a credit union, if you're a financial institution, let's talk about where disaster recovery as a service and the cloud offers you advantages. You can meet the member needs when crisis strikes, of course, goes without saying. Important thing is you can meet the compliance audits and exams. You will do much better at being able to be audited because of the capabilities of your DRAAS provider, integrating software, hardware, networking, virtualization, and letting you see where everything lives instead of going to a hodgepodge of disparate places. Recovery speed. As you'll see from Ken speaks, you can get a much better bang for your buck. You can restore branch offices. Because of the nature of the backups we do, you can be backing up loan officers' machines when they're home. You can back up branch office systems, not just the central site. It's pay as you go, so you don't have to put out a lot of capital, which leads oftentimes to cost savings because you're not overbuying. The same vein, it's flexible. If I add some branches, if I shut down something, if I sell a division, I can move as I need to. I can protect against the micro disaster. I lost something on site, or a macro disaster. I lost a building, a facility, even a geography. And I think what's important, when I was in the financial services industry, we were constantly buying and starting things. We went into the insurance business. We bought a competitor in market. We bought somebody in another part of the country or another part of the world. And the challenge for the CIO is the day that the deal closes, you're responsible for their backup and their DR, even though you probably haven't integrated their systems. Do we have a way to throw a backup solution on top of whatever they're running? And the answer with DRAAS is yes, you do. And for those of you who lived in the headaches of all of a sudden 2 weeks from Thursday, it's your problem to back that up, I bet you're thinking, boy, that's a great advantage. So let's kind of close out my part of this by talking about what should you be listening for? What should you be looking at when you look at a disaster recovery as a service vendor? I think very important is how is the data encrypted? Look, the cloud is the cloud. It's outsourcing in another way. If you're not encrypting your secure data at rest everywhere, in motion everywhere, shame on you. Whether you're outsourced or in-house, best practice is say encrypt at rest and in motion. Can I test the application and data recovery? If it's a pain in the neck, I'm not going to test, and then I'm going to be surprised quarterly when I hit that big test. Can I look in one central place and get a pulse? Do I have a dashboard? If your vendor doesn't have a dashboard, again, you're facing the world where I'm looking at my NAS and my SAN and my tape and my backup software and trying to figure out what's working. Will it scale? If I bought a thing that's sitting in a data center, if I bought some software, what happens when I outgrow it, especially if I do an acquisition? How long does the failover take? Obviously. Where are the virtual machines virtualized? On an appliance, in the cloud, or both? That may affect the decisions you make because of the control and time. And then is there an audit log, a report, a way to tell what's going on? I'll tell you all a funny story as I finish. Ken and I were reviewing this slide yesterday. And I said, Ken, what's the most important thing to you? And he said, number 5, how long does it take to fail over? I said, gee, Ken, as a customer of Infrascale, I'm really happy you're focused on that, because obviously faster is better. But for me as a CIO, I want to know, number 3, can I see that everything is okay? And number 7, is an audit log provided? Because as bank executives, our job is to control our environment. If you go back to CAMELS, we're looking at management's ability to manage. And so I want to suggest to everybody, whatever tool you pick, to take advantage of the physics and the economics of the cloud. Make sure it's a tool that gives you the ability to respond well to your own inquiry, to your internal auditor, to your external auditor, and to your regulator. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ken and let him tell you the features of the Infrascale solution.
Terrific, and thanks for that, Wayne. It's wonderful to have a true expert on the line with us today. Hello again, folks. Ken here. Let me tell you a little bit about Infrascale and how our services can help provide on-demand failover for credit unions and small banks. First, a little bit about us. So what is Infrascale? Well, it's a platform that provides disaster recovery as a service, or DRAAS, some people call it DRAAS, along with cloud backup, archiving, and then endpoint protection. So think of that as, say, laptop fleet protection. We've won many awards, including this year, the Gartner Group named us their cool vendor in business continuity and disaster recovery. And I like to talk about why we do what we do. And it's a little bit sort of philosophical, but going back to Wayne's point that we've been fighting this same battle around recovering data and doing it quickly and securely for 50 years, right? At Infrascale, we observe that it's there's this massive gap in the market that the very biggest companies, the very biggest banks, the very biggest institutions have got on-demand failover, and they can do all the things that Wayne was talking about. But most of us can't because it's been too costly and it's been too cumbersome. And the cloud creates this opportunity to fix those problems. So at Infrascale, we really believe that every company or institution has the right to protect their data and to get back up online very quickly and affordably in the case when disaster strikes. In terms of just a few statistics about Infrascale, we've been around for quite a while, almost 10 years. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, although from my accent you can probably tell that I'm not from there. We're protecting more than 1 million devices around the world and counting. That device is usually a server, a virtual server, or a laptop. We've got 12 global data centers around the world, and today we're protecting more than 100 petabytes of data. So we've got quite a bit of scale. And I mentioned before downtime, and I want to share our mission statement with you. When I introduce Infrascale at a conference, I say, look, we're a DRAAS company. We're using the cloud to eradicate downtime. And that really is at the heart what we're offering. We equip every company with the ability to recover from any disaster quickly and affordably, literally with the push of a button. And so this is our solution map, which sort of shows you everything we provide. I won't go through this in granular detail, but if you think about all of your infrastructure, one way to bucket it is you've got mobile devices, desktops and laptops, physical servers, and then virtual servers. So those are the columns here in this chart. And generally there are 3 different types of activities that you're going to want to engage in as you build the sort of disaster recovery plan that Wayne was talking about. At the bottom you're going to want to have an archiving layer, so data archiving, and we provide that. You're also going to want to have backup and recovery solutions for everything in your infrastructure. And when I say everything, I mean everything from that IBM P series through to, Mac OS X devices that employees might be bringing to work themselves, God forbid. And then at the highest level, for your mission-critical infrastructure, you want push-button failover. You want the equivalent of what Wayne was describing as sort of the hot site or the warm site, that within minutes you can fail over your critical infrastructure to a second location and get back up and running. Now, in terms of the types of targets that Infrascale supports, we've generally tried to be cloud agnostic. So when you work with Infrascale, you can leverage the Infrascale cloud, definitely. You can also leverage your own private cloud infrastructure, and Wayne was sort of talking us through the different elements you should be thinking of there if you are building private cloud. We also support all the major third-party clouds. So if you're using the Google Compute platform or Amazon or Windows Azure, then you can use all of those platforms with our technology. And lastly, we also have our own appliance line that you can leverage. So quite a flexible array of deployment options there. And this slide builds on one of the things that Wayne was talking about, but there has been this continuum or this evolution over the last 50 years of data protection and systems that ensure uptime, right? We started with tape backup a long time ago, but these days that's sort of old and unreliable. We then evolved through to disk backup, became the primary paradigm in the 90s, but again, that was quite expensive and didn't actually necessarily provide all the sorts of failover that you need, particularly in highly regulated environments like banks and credit unions. Then second-site failover became popular, particularly for folks who who really had to hit stringent RTO and RPO requirements, but that was very IT intensive and very expensive. The benefit of DRAAS is that it combines the speed and the uptime of second-site failover, but it comes at the cost of a traditional enterprise tape backup solution. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, there's a row of circles. Well, that indicates how quickly you can get back up and running when a disaster strikes. And then there's some dollar signs that indicate expense. And if you do a total cost of ownership analysis of DRAAS, and you compare it to, say, second-site failover and tape backup, you'll find that DRAAS delivers an RTO and RPO of roughly a warm site solution, but at a price point of an enterprise tape library. And that's really one of the breakthrough elements of DRAAS. And so how do we do it, technically speaking? Here on this slide at the top, we have the traditional backup and restore flow. And at the bottom, we have the DRAAS flow. And it's a bit of a complicated slide, so let me just walk you through it. So I'm going to walk you through the backup and restore flow at the top. So on the very left, I've got the servers that I'm protecting. So you can see I've got a VMware server there, a Windows machine, and a Linux machine. and I'm backing those up to, in this case, a backup appliance. And you can see that little green backup bubble. Let's say that I'm moving 10 terabytes worth of data from 10 servers. And let's say it takes 10 hours. So we'll just go with 10, 10, 10 to make it simple. In the case of a disaster, presuming that you've replicated this data to a place that wasn't affected by the disaster, you then have to go through another parallel operation of restoring that data back to secondary hardware, right? So the first location has a problem. You now need to go to your second location. You've now got to have secondary compute infrastructure, and you have to do a restore operation to that secondary compute infrastructure. And that restore operation is going to be linearly related to the time the backup took. So if it was 10 servers, 10 terabytes, and it took 10 hours, it's going to take at least that to restore your data back out before you can start running your environment again. And this backup and restore flow, which has been the primary paradigm for 30, 40, 50 years, means that we end up with hours, possibly to days, before we can get our systems back up and running. Now let's compare that to DRAAS, which is the blue flow at the bottom. So on the very left, I've still got my same infrastructure, right? So it's still 10 terabytes, 10 servers, and maybe it still takes 10 hours to back up, although modern companies like Infrascale have done a lot of work to optimize that, frankly. But let's talk about what happens in the case of a disaster, because that's really the key thing to this slide. If you look at the orange bubble at the top, the run bubble, you can see that that's sort of on the secondary hardware after I've done a restore. But if you look down the bottom, what you'll see is that the run bubble is right there on the backup appliance or right there in the cloud. So sophisticated DRAAS solutions will provide you with an on-premise hardware component, which is a hyper-converged solution that contains a virtualization layer and contains all the compute and network and disk storages you will need to run your infrastructure on-prem right on your backup appliance. And then, in the case that you've had a site-wide failure, you can do exactly the same thing in the cloud. So, critically, we've eliminated the restore process. So instead of 10 hours to do my restore in a way that's linearly proportional to the amount of data or the number of systems, I can now have a fixed constant time to restore that can be measured in seconds, right? Because I'm going to virtualize, spin up, inject them into that hypervisor and run them right there on the fly on my backup infrastructure or out in my secondary cloud storage infrastructure. So this is yielding a massive adoption curve of DRAAS in the market. So Markets actually is saying that the DRAAS market's growing at 53% a year and is predicting that the market will go from $1.4 billion in 2015 to $11.9 billion in 2020. And what this effectively represents is DRAAS bringing about the death of backup, right? $11 billion is roughly the size of the backup and data protection market. So what these numbers are indicating is that the cloud and software is eating traditional hardware-based data protection alive, right? And so there's a really important trend to get ahead of and to start to play with in your infrastructure and start to learn and adopt so that you can benefit from all of these cost savings and speed improvements. And so let me then sort of walk you through the Infrascale solution. Firstly, we allow you to back up any device. So going back over to my 4 buckets, we support mobile devices, we support laptops and desktops, we support physical servers, so Windows on Metal or Linux on Metal, Unix, as well as virtual servers, the 2 major platforms, Hyper-V and VMware. We support every major operating system. So we support everything from, I like to say we support everything from mobile phones to mainframes, right? So whether you're running an old AIX machine or whether you're running the latest version of Hyper-V, Infrascale's got native technology that knows how to talk to that and work with that in an application-aware and transactionally consistent kind of way. Deploy in any form factor. So we can deliver you a hybrid cloud appliance where we send you out the equipment that you'll actually install on-prem. We can also deliver it to you as software, or we can deliver it for you directly installed in the cloud, so you've actually got no setup to do. Use any cloud. Gotchas with DRAAS vendors out there, and so nothing to do with Infrascale, just this is something to look for, is that cloud vendors like to lock you into their cloud. At Infrascale, we sort of believe that the cloud is this new computing paradigm that is going to be as ubiquitous as the PC platform became, starting in the early 80s. So it's critical that you adopt solutions, DRAAS solutions in particular, that are cloud agnostic and can run in any cloud. So at Infrascale, obviously we support our own cloud, but we also support Amazon, Azure, and private cloud configurations. Recover anything. This is important. So, when you recover things, you often think in terms of data. So you think in terms of a file or a folder or maybe a database or, an Exchange server or SQL server. I like to think about running systems, right? So the holy grail of data protection is not that I can recover a single message from an email server or not that I can recover a version of a file. And you can do all those things at Infrascale, don't get me wrong. But the magic of DRAAS is that my recovery object is going to be a running system. And so I actually like to posit, Wayne and I, you should talk about this, but I like to posit that we actually need a new concept in data protection. We've got our RTO and RPO. We need something like a recovery object type to stipulate what is it that we're actually bringing back. Is it just a file? Is it just a version? Is it an entire running system? Or is it 10 servers connected in a running network? And that's the promise of DRAAS, that with the push of a button, you can bring back an entire complex infrastructure and have it running. You've got to be able to boot anywhere. So you want to pick a solution provider who can give you an appliance to install on-prem. That allows you to do local failover, and that's particularly useful for handling microfailures, as well as a provider that's going to allow you to go and run out in the public cloud, which is critical if you've had a site-wide failure. And then lastly, you've got to be able to elegantly fail back. So it's no good if your systems get jailed in your DRAAS vendor's solution. You want to be able to bring those systems back to your production environment as quickly as possible. So in this diagram, we see how Infrascale would actually get deployed. Let's take the case of a small community bank, and let's say this bank's got 2 offices. Well, in one deployment model, the bank could put an Infrascale device in each of its offices, protect all of the infrastructure in and around that office, so physical servers, virtual servers, desktop laptops, and then do an active-active replication between the 2 Infrascale devices. And this is quite useful. This gives you total control of your infrastructure. It's a little bit more hardware intensive though. Another solution is, instead of having a second appliance in a second location, leverage the cloud, right? And then that way each of your sites can be replicating directly up to the cloud. And in the case of a disaster, when you say recover my infrastructure, you then get the option. It'll say, okay, Ken, where do you want to recover your infrastructure? Do you want to recover it on appliance 1, or do you want to recover it out in the cloud? And you can control that all from a central dashboard. Wayne also mentioned the importance of encryption, and he's right. You've got to, the first responsibility for making sure your data is secure sits with you. You've got to make certain that you're employing tools that encrypt your data both in transit and at rest. But there are vendors that can help you do that. So there's a standard in data security called double-blind encryption, pioneered by the US Department of Defense in the 70s. And it's based on a pretty simple concept. In fact, this will resonate with you. So when I normally do a webinar, I explain double-blind encryption in these terms. Imagine you've got some gold in a safety deposit box and you need to get that gold out. Well, you need to go to the bank with your key to the safety deposit box, and the bank manager needs to be there with his key, and you both need to unlock the data. That's the metaphor that I normally use. It's particularly appropriate for today's audience. So with double-blind encryption, before data leaves your premise, it gets encrypted with a key that only you have and only you control. Then it goes over the WAN or over a VPN or a secure tunnel, and then it hits the data center and gets encrypted again with a key that your vendor knows and only your vendor knows. So the only way to actually get that data out is for the vendor and for the customer to cooperate. And so as we all know, in data security, there's no silver bullet, there's no perfect solution. But by employing double-blind encryption, you can geometrically reduce your risk of a data breach when it comes to data protection. And I think it's time that people take security as a first principle in data protection, right? When we think about some of the major breaches that have occurred in the last couple of years, they've actually gone in through backup and archive systems, because those systems are both A, places where data gets aggregated, and B, generally not hardened systems, because data protection vendors and DR vendors have always pushed off the security burden to other companies. But it's time that DR vendors make that the first class principle, and at Infrascale we've built that in from the ground up. Another really important point here is that the cloud delivers this economic transformation that Wayne talked about earlier. By leveraging the hyperscale infrastructure that's being deployed in thousands of data centers around the world by these massive IT behemoths, you can benefit from the breakthrough pricing that delivers. So with Infrascale's solution, for example, we're roughly 75 to 80% less expensive than an EMC or an IBM or a Commvault DR solution. Right? So it can make your budget go a lot further. And that's really important, particularly if you're a smaller financial services institution and maybe you don't have the budget to put in a complete end-to-end EMC, high availability solution, for example. So some of the things included with the Infrascale solution are cloud spillover, which is a technology that allows us to intelligently move data from on-site out to the cloud and back again transparently to you. We've got very, very simple service contracts, no additional hours, professional services. I was surprised recently I saw that Commvault is now getting more revenue from professional services that they charge for deploying their technology than they're actually getting from their technology, which is not the way it should be. Maintenance is included with Infrascale. That's 24/7 US-based support for 3 years included at no additional cost. There's no hidden fees. Our solutions are all priced in simple monthly or quarterly or annual packages that are very simple to use. You can use your hardware or you can purchase our equipment. And as Wayne was talking about, you can test with impunity. So no more sort of that whole DR test hamster wheel Wayne walked through of write a plan, exercise the plan, analyze the results, and remediate. Well, instead of doing that once a quarter because it's such a pain, with Infrascale, you can do it every week because it's so simple to fail over, and there's unlimited tests included, and there's that entire audit trail that Wayne was talking about earlier. So it dramatically simplifies what's involved in exercising and testing your disaster recovery plan and proving to the regulators that you're in compliance. And so when we talk about the big things stopping smaller institutions from having failover in place, or 15-minute failover, as I like to talk about it. The big three are that it's too expensive, they've got insufficient IT resources, and that there's just so many compatibility and complexity issues that it's too hard to tackle. And so at Infrascale, we've tried to solve these 3 core pains, where we've reduced DR costs by up to 80% against the major big iron vendors. We've delivered push-button failover that lets you fail over your infrastructure in minutes. And we've made it flexible so that you can support over 100 different operating system versions. Because we're cloud agnostic, you can use our cloud, your cloud, or any cloud, and really support any of the infrastructure that you've got in-house. So that actually brings us to the end of the canned portion of today's webinar, everybody. Thanks for paying attention. Just remember this, Infrascale's mission statement is to eradicate downtime, and our vision is that we can make it remarkably easy and affordable for every company to protect and access the data under any condition. And we'd love you to join in the conversation. So follow us on Twitter. You can direct message us. We're at Infrascale. And please, any messages that you do post, use the hashtag DRAASFI, and let's start an ongoing conversation to educate financial institutions, credit unions, that this DRAAS solution is out there for them. And so with that, we're going to turn to the Q&A. Wayne, do I still have you on the line?
Yes, you do, Ken.
Terrific. All right, well, I'm just going to sort out these questions here. But any closing comments on the canned portion of the webinar before we dive into the Q&A?
Well, I'll just say to the group that my participation here doesn't end when this ends. Obviously, Infrascale understands their product better than I ever will, but if anybody here or the folks you share your material with want to have a discussion with somebody that's more on the bank and financial institution side, feel free to reach me through Twitter at Wayne Sadin. And as Ken says, if you use that hashtag, we'll be able to keep the conversations together. I'll also be happy to take private direct messages and answer whatever questions I can help with.
Terrific. And just one housekeeping item here. I actually got the prize rise sorry, I announced that we would be giving away a Kindle, but we are in fact giving away an Xbox One for the person who asked the most questions. So thank you, Brian, in the audience for pointing that out. Apologies for the confusion. All right, so let's get into some of the questions. Wayne, I've got a question here that I think is for you. An audience member asks, I keep reading that the cloud is insecure. Can I really trust my institution's data to the cloud?
No. Well, I think I kind of said something about that. The cloud cloud providers in the public cloud invest billions of dollars in keeping it secure. But as both Ken and I said, you can't outsource your brains because you have a cloud. You should be encrypting your data at rest. You should be encrypting your data in motion. So whatever you're doing, wherever you outsource it, wherever you store it and carry it away, you should be doing that, whether on laptops, on desktops, on servers, on mainframes. So there's the element of they provide a lot of security and reporting, and you need to provide your own layer. And the fact that the FFIEC actually does address cloud means they're not unaware of it. So the fact that you're using a cloud provider doesn't automatically raise a red flag. And I know a lot of bank folks were worried about that until the FFIEC kind of put out that statement that clarified their position.
Terrific. And we've got a question here from Brian. Is Infrascale able to provide SOC 1 and SSAE 16 reports on an annual basis? We also need copies of verified financials as part of the vendor management process. Yes, Brian, we can provide all of that. So we leverage networks of data centers. We've got various options, most of which are SSAE 16. Remember also we partner with all the major public clouds, so you can leverage Amazon's network or Azure's network as well. And yes, we can also provide whatever sort of compliance documents you need on an annual basis. We currently, I should have mentioned this earlier, we currently work with many banks and credit unions across the country. So core market segments for Infrascale are state government, municipalities, law enforcement, banks, insurance companies, mortgage brokerages, credit unions, right? So this is sort of right in our wheelhouse and something we do quite a lot of. All right, we've got another question here for Wayne. So Wayne, this question comes from Michael, and that question is, does the FFIEC cybersecurity assessment tool address disaster recovery?
Yeah, it actually does. If you look at the information provided with that tool, there's a number of PDFs on the website, and there's kind of an overview. And they only mention disaster recovery in one place that I recall, but they talk about it in terms of one of the domains having to do with just you need a disaster recovery environment that should be integrated into your cyber risk environment. I think that's the only reference. And then there's another section called something like inherent risks. And just like there's inherent risks around outsourcing, there's a specific inherent risk about how much you put in the cloud and how you protect it in the cloud. So disaster recovery as a whole is addressed kind of in one sentence, and the cloud, not just disaster recovery, but cloud in general, is also addressed. And just like every other inherent risk, if you've done risk mitigation, it's inherent risk is the risk you start out with, and then your risk mitigation strategy, which is what you do to reduce it, and then your residual risk. And the question is the residual risk acceptable, and is the cost of mitigation acceptable? So again, the beauty of it is DR is just one of the many things we all worry about, and the cloud is just one of the many ways we can choose to host our environment.
Great. Now, there's another question here that I'll take from Anthony. How do you compare with Unitrans? Well, Anthony, in the handout section that you can download, there's actually this slide which I skipped over because it's a bit of an eye chart, but it lays out some other appliance and data protection vendors and sort of compares different technology. Unitrans is the second to last column. So some of Infrascale's major advantages over Unitrans are things like cloud spillover. So cloud spillover is a technology that allows us to be 30 to 40% less expensive than a pure appliance play like a Unitrans. Another very important point is that Unitrans just doesn't do endpoints, right? That's a server-only solution. Whereas Infrascale, because we were born in the cloud and are truly hybrid, we protect mobile devices, we protect desktops, we protect laptops, and we protect all of your server-based infrastructure. And then, of course, another problem with the Unitrend solution is really the breadth of their environment. So whether they don't support Linux running on Metal, for example. And then lastly, Unitrend is very expensive. So quite a few different ways that I think you'll find our solution superior to Unitrend, and we'd love to talk to you more about that in detail. So please do get in touch. If you'd like for us to contact you and get you more information, feel free to just type into the questions tool, yes, please follow up with me.
Hey, Ken, I want to throw something in there. This is Wayne, and I want to make a comment. When I first saw the Infrascale solution, and I recognized that they handle endpoints of just about any type, that to me was a tremendous opportunity. I've got lots of backup software that backs up servers and backs up SANs and NASs and JBODs in my data center. But I've also bought the Mozy Pros and the Sugar Syncs and all those other kind of halfway solutions to handle my endpoints. I've had thousands of people backed up that way. And having one place, one dashboard, one system that tells me all my loan officers, all my executive officers, all of my mortgage brokers are all backed up so that I can prove that I can put everything back together again. It's just something that you don't see in the traditional backup solutions that I've been exposed to.
Yeah, and I think it comes, so yeah, I mean, sometimes I'm too coy. I think it goes back to the point you made earlier about the cloud fundamentally changes the physics model, right? So this gets a little bit wonky, but if you think about the architecture that emerged, we started on mainframe, and tape could be directly tethered to the devices we were protecting. In the 90s with the client-server revolution, all of our data protection technology then merged to a client-server-based metaphor, but that meant we were LAN-centric. And so if you've got a roaming laptop that's moving in and out of the network, that's really just not going to work well in a LAN-centric data protection environment. With the cloud, we've got the ability to protect anything because the cloud is ubiquitous and omnipresent, and every device from the Nest thermostat in my home through to the iPhone 6 I'm talking to you on through to all of my important data center infrastructure has a cloud connection. So that is one of the revolutionary elements of cloud, is that now because everything's connected, everything can be protected. Right, we've got one more question here from Michael. We actually two in a row from Michael. One is that, does DRAAS eliminate the need for off-site data storage? Well, Michael, sort of. So DRAAS usually implicates having off-site data storage. So most DRAAS solutions will have an on-premise component and an off-site component or a cloud component. And so depending upon the DRAAS vendor you choose, yes, it would replace your need to have off-site data storage. Now, I imagine there are people in the audience who are still backing up to tape and then sending them off in Iron Mountain trucks every week. My first job out of college was to take the tapes out of the tape library, put them in the red box, and hand them to the Iron Mountain courier. That's a system that you really need to get rid of if that's what you're still using. And so if that's what you're talking about, then absolutely. Moving to a cloud-based DRAAS solution really obviates the need for that type of a system to put in place. Michael's got another question. Does DRAAS compete with or complement VRM's Site Recovery Manager, VMware's Site Recovery Manager? Well, Michael, it both competes with and complements, right? So because Infrascale focuses on the mid-market, we have built solutions that are broad in their applicability. What do I mean by that? Well, we allow you to protect and perform failover operations on Windows servers running on Metal or Linux servers running on Metal, whereas VMware's SRM solution doesn't support those platforms. We support IBM AIX running on Metal. We support all the major flavors of Unix for that matter. Again, VMware doesn't. So VMware is a very closed system, and the VMware SRM solution is very good if you're only protecting VMware, although it's quite expensive, I might add. So if you're using or looking at SRM, then the Infrascale solution is definitely something that you should consider. Brian writes, you don't compare against Carbonite. In the past, Carbonite didn't address bare metal servers nor Exchange SQL. I believe they are able to back these up. Do you not see them as a viable competitor? I would agree that their offerings are best suited for Soho and home environments. Brian, they're definitely not a viable competitor. So Carbonite's great if you're a 0 to 5 person business, or maybe 0 to 50. And their stated strategy, if you listen to their CEO and chairman, is really to focus on the 0 to 100 market. But if you're a business of any scale, carbonite's definitely not sort of a viable solution. Most importantly, because they're not a DRAAS solution, right? DRAAS implicates the ability to do failover, and carbonite doesn't provide that. So yeah, I don't really look at them as a competitor. Brian also asks, does your Hyper-V backup solution address snapshots? Brian, it is compatible with snapshots, yes. And so that's not a problem. And similarly also on VMware. All right, we're running out of time here, folks, so we've got time for just a couple more questions. Sorry, I've got to pop up here in the middle of my screen. Wayne, one more question for you from the audience. How hard is it to switch clouds if our needs change?
Well, I think that's important to consider. People say, well, I'm locked into my cloud provider. And I will tell you that if you're in the major public clouds, you can get your data off of them. I participated in an interesting debate. Well, I've got 4 petabytes of data on Amazon, and it's going to take me 3 weeks to move it somewhere else. That's an Amazon problem. I said, no, that's a bandwidth problem. If you're storing 4 petabytes of data somewhere and you got to move it, maybe you got to provision different telecom to move it. But if you're using again, there's the open cloud companies, the Amazon, Google, Facebook, IBM, Microsoft, they tend to be very open platforms. I caution people about this kind of hybrid cloud world where companies, and I'm not picking on Rackspace, I'm just going to use them as an example, where a Rackspace offers a cloud. They don't really have the scale to do what the majors do. They do offer some customization and they can do things that the others can't. But when you're dealing with one of the non-major public clouds, always ask what their rules are about data ownership. Many of us have discovered in SaaS vendors, when you're outsourcing an application, that the data you've put into the SaaS product is stuck. You can't convert from one ERP system to another easily. So I suggest to you that the higher you go on the stack, the more careful you are. And the more you deviate from the established major vendors, the more you ask that question. But it's always possible somehow to move your data. And so that's the beauty of a cloud. If a vendor is not meeting your needs, if the pricing changes, there are ways, at least off the major public clouds, to move your data. And I'll let Ken answer for Infrascale. I don't know.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, one of the things, if you remember that sort of circle I did, that build slide, the last thing in that circle is what I call elegant failback. And that's the idea of not being jailed, not ending up in a data jail. We get a lot of customers who come to us who complain about other DRAAS vendors where that's literally the phrase they use. I end up in a data jail where I have to use their cloud infrastructure. And that's not a good place to be. So you've got to make certain that cloud portability and elegant failback is part of the requirements you're looking for. And folks, with that, that brings us to the end of the webinar. So I want to encourage you to join in the conversation on Twitter, at Infrascale and hashtag DRAAS IS. And before we close here, Carla is, oh, sorry, DRAAS FI, my goodness. Can't read my own slides. DRAAS FI, hashtag DRAAS FI. But before we close, Kindle's got the announcement on the Xbox giveaway. So, Carla, why don't you jump in there and let us know who won that prize?
Yep, so the winner today is Michael Johnson. So congratulations. I'm going to send you an email this afternoon with further details. Congrats again.
Terrific. Well, Wayne, thank you very much for joining us today. I've learned a lot. Hopefully it's been useful for the audience. And maybe we can do another one of these and turn it into a series.
Sounds good with me, Ken. Take care, everybody. And again, if you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me.
Terrific.